And we are back on this Tuesday, November 15th, 2011 edition of InfoWars Nightly News. We just broke down how our environment is being assaulted in what is admitted to be a global secret program of geoengineering. It's an admission that there is a secret program going on. We need to know exactly what that program entails and how this aluminum dioxide, barium salts, and sulfur dioxide is affecting not just plant and animal life, but human life as well, as the levels of toxic metals goes up in our soil. And our next guest is going to speak to one of the real canaries in the coal mine of the different biospheres that are on this planet. And then Gerald Celente is joining us, of course, after that. He has had his bank account robbed, all part of the globalist world depression that's being engineered. He had the gold out of his account stolen. Just incredible information breaking here, coming up with Gerald Celente after this interview. Now, Konrad Bouffard, if I'm pronouncing that right,
yes, sir,
is our guest. And let me tell you, we are so blessed to have somebody like this right here in Central Texas. He is recognized by many publications, and I have a list of them here, as one of the leading beekeepers in the world. He has the largest beekeeping school in the world. That is undisputed. He started out in bee removal instead of just killing bees that are so important for our environment and the entire life cycle from plants on up. He specialized in that. And he got so busy, he quit being a school teacher and moved on from there to now being one of the most successful beekeepers in the world. And his honey is also, of course, shipped all over the United States and the world. And I was mentioning to him that my uncle had worked for Fain's Honey going back, 20 years ago. And he said, oh, yes, we work with Fain's. So I know that's another company that's real raw honey, not mixing in corn syrup or all that other garbage. And they don't strain out all the good stuff that's in it. So we're going to talk about what is real honey, what's happening with colony collapse all over the world, and this report by Texas A&M that 76 or 77%, depending on the brand they tested, of major companies had no honey in it. And I mean that as an oxymoron or as a pun, because it's not honey if it doesn't have pollen in it, and he's going to explain that. It's no longer honey. It's been cooked. It's been totally changed. And it's great to have you here, Konrad. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
I'm going to try to just give you the floor. You heard the points I threw out. Run through it, and where we stand today.
Sure. Well, this article was like a godsend for most beekeepers, especially beekeepers that are interested in producing raw, unfiltered, unheated honey. And it basically revealed what most all beekeepers know, that the large honey companies are filtering out the pollen and the large sugar crystals and cooking honey from raw honey when they get it in to put it on the shelf, because they believe that consumers want that. They believe that the consumers want honey that isn't really honey by definition. Honey by definition includes the nectar from plants that bees have converted through their natural processes into the syrupy part of honey, and then the pollen. And the pollen is a critical part. If you take that out, it's not honey. And so, anyone can tell you that honey has to have pollen. So when some of these larger companies come around, and as they've been doing for years now, and take all the pollen out, it does nothing good for the consumer, and it's kind of like taking the engine out of a car.
That's like the system telling us we want white Wonder Bread and not wheat bread. But over the decades, they found, the public doesn't really want that. And when you have allergies, they say eat local honey because it has the allergens in the area. I mean, that's always what's been in honey. That's part of it. And can you speak to, there's a lot of research done on the amazing health benefits of real raw honey, like Round Rock honey. We've got here on the table.
Yeah, there are many benefits to honey. It's been shown to reduce blood pressure. It, in my opinion, has been, and the opinion of many other experts, has been shown to reduce allergies or allergic reactions, histamine-type reactions, rather. Taken over time, it can normalize blood sugar levels. If you have a wound on your skin, if you get burned, you can put honey on it, and it will actually help heal that wound, because honey naturally draws water and keeps the skin moist. It helps.
And it was the only thing still surviving in the Egyptian tombs, 3,000 years old.
Yeah, honey is the only food in nature that's naturally, self-preserving. That's why you can put it in a bottle. You could put it in this glass bottle here and come back in 5,000 years, and it would still be totally edible.
What are the big companies, and we have a list of them, that you see dominating store shelves where it's almost completely clear like water,
right.
And it tastes terrible. I mean, I don't like the processed honey. As a child, my mother would buy both kinds. I always liked the real brown honey. And more and more people are starting, obviously, to buy the real honey because I see it starting to displace the establishment, so-called natural stuff. But what is that stuff that's on the shelves that is devoid of any flavor and doesn't have any pollen in it?
Sure, it's honey that, and not all honey producers are doing this, but it's mostly among the large honey producers. And typically what they do is, they filter out all the pollen, they heat it above 130 degrees, sometimes for days on end. And the reason why they do that is they want to make all the sugar crystals inside the honey the same size, and they want to filter out all the pollens, because the pollens are, of course, what make it crystallize quicker. So they think, that crystallized honey is bad, and they know what's best for the consumer, so they're going to tell the consumer that it's bad. And it's kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy that some consumers believe this, but actually, in reality, if you were to go around to most consumers, they believe that they want honey straight out of the hive because it's a God-given product. There's nothing wrong with honey as it comes straight out of the hive. In fact, you can go like I did when I first started keeping bees over here in East Austin and pull a hive straight out of a church wall or out of a home, the wall of a home or out of an attic, and eat it right there. And it's completely edible.
Well, that's what I buy, and we actually have listeners that also send it to us. I buy the sliced cord,
right.
And that's what I like, and then I just spit the wax out.
Right.
I mean, that has the real flavor when it's in the. I mean, obviously you're the expert, but just my taste buds like the in the comb.
Right, right. And if you take comb honey, usually at the bottom of each cell of the comb, there's usually a little bit more pollen that just because of gravity that collects in the bottom part there. So if you're eating comb honey, you're getting a little bit more, a little bit higher concentration of pollen. That's just based on my own experience. And then also chewing the wax helps remove all sorts of things from your teeth. It's a good way to manage tartar in your teeth.
From your research, why? I mean, even medical doctors tell people that have allergies, you need to go and you start eating a lot of local honey when allergy season kicks in. And I've done it myself. It really alleviates a lot of it. What's happening?
You mean what? When
you eat the local honey, why is it helping with allergies?
I see what you're saying. So you're taking in a small amount of pollen, and you're having a small immune reaction, and over time your body builds up a tolerance to that. It's the same concept as allergy shots, building up tolerance over time until you're at such a point where you don't react anymore to that particular pollen.
Now, I want to get into the fact that you have the largest beekeeping school
right.
In the world. That's great that you're bringing real, true agriculture back to society.
Right.
And I'm also interested in what I've read about tax incentives, where people can, even on small pieces of property, knock their property taxes down to almost nothing if they beekeep. I was reading where Bon Jovi has like some $10 million piece of property, but he pays $100 a year. I'm very interested in that because I think we live out in the country. My wife's like, let's get the ag exemption with some donkeys. And I'm like, no, let's do bees. But right. Before we get into that business angle of avoiding the big, wicked tax man, who wants to squeeze us to pay it to offshore bankers. What about the crisis bees are going through? There's all these different reports that it's the pesticides, the BT corn, the cell towers, the chemtrails. I'm sure it's a cocktail of things, but from your deep research, because you are respected around the world by folks for being one of the biggest beekeepers out there, what's your gut dead reckoning that's causing this, and how big is the crisis? I've seen numbers in some areas of 80% of the bees gone.
Right, and I think that's true. I don't. I think that I couldn't put a number on it, but I can say that I don't know a single beekeeper who is doing pollination, like cross-continent pollination, who hasn't lost more than half of his hives. And
yeah, I saw that as the average. Some areas around 80, they were saying.
Right, right. And areas like upstate New York, some parts of Southern California, and this is just talking to people I know in those areas, they've lost everything. I mean, forget 80, 90%. They've lost 100%. They lost every single hive.
Wow.
And I don't know the man, but I heard from another person who knows a gentleman in Florida who took his hives to Montana. And when he got there, the bees were alive. They came back, I think it was 7-10 days later, and literally every hive, there wasn't a bee around anywhere. I mean, they were just gone. And so what that tells me, and also based on just my gut feeling, is that it is exposure to pesticides, and it's a new class of pesticides. There's been a lot of research on neonicotinoids and other types of pesticides like that. Of course, that may not be 100% of the reason. There may be other things like travel fatigue with, the cross-country pollination and stuff like that. But it wasn't, things didn't get really bad until these other chemicals started being introduced, the neonicotinoid brands. And I 60, go ahead.
No, I mean, break down what that particular is, because the studies I saw even going back 5 years ago in Germany and other places were that where Bt crops are grown, and for those that don't know, that's a pharmacological crop, right. Where the corn and other crops grows on average about 1,000 times higher level of a natural pesticide that's fungus-based, and whereas insects eat it, they die. And so, yeah, and then you pass it on to humans, and there's all the connections to organ failure and things in mammal species that are mainline science, and that's been connected as part of the cocktail. Is that the same type of pesticide or something different?
Well, I don't know enough about pesticides from a chemical point of view to know if that is exactly it. Well,
these are pharmacological crops where it's, I mean, as you know, in the crop itself.
Oh, I see, where the seed is coated.
Yes.
The chemical, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree with that. Because, in case in point, cotton. Okay, you take a cotton seed, you coat it, as most commercial cotton seeds are these days, with, a certain chemical, whatever that chemical may be, and you plant it in the ground, it comes up, bees are attracted to cotton. So they're going to go there, and they're going to pick up that, plus they're going to pick up pesticides that have been sprayed over. So it's kind of like a coming up from the bottom, coming down from the top. The bees get hit both ways, and they survive just long enough to bring that pollen back to the hive, and you end up with some cotton honey that's laced with all these other pesticides. There are very few people within the government that I trust to do a really good job, but one of them is a scientist named Dr. Jonathan Barber at the USDA Honey Lab, and I believe he's in North Carolina. And he did a screen on our honey. He's actually done several screens on our honey for pesticides, and it was an exhaustive one. Like, they tested for several hundred pesticides, and they tested down to not parts per million, but parts per billion. And with ours, they found nothing below 7 parts per billion, and that was just remarkable. He said to me, we get honeys in here almost every day that are so laced with pesticides, it's like, it's unbelievable that people would even be allowed to eat this stuff. And he didn't name names, but the assumption is that it's, some of these larger national brands. And so I don't know if that's true or not, but, he's a scientist for the USDA. He's not going to come out and say which ones are which, but, if you were to go one step further with this report by Andrew Schneider, of Food Safety News, and, take these honeys that have been shown to not have any pollen and then also test them for pesticides, it would get very expensive, but I think it would also be very revealing.
And by the way, I was talking to Mike Adams, and you'd also brought this up. You were the one that recommended to Andrew Schneider, this reporter, I think you said a year ago, to go test these big brand name honeys and see if they were devoid of pollen, and he actually went and did it. So now you're saying, now go test for pesticides.
Yeah, I would love to see him do that. I mean, I don't have the money to do that.
Because you've had your honey tested, and you were saying, he was saying it was one of the lowest you'd ever seen.
It wasn't Andrew Schneider. It was the USDA scientist,
yeah.
Jonathan Barber.
Can I see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's amazing. Now, again, this is Round Rock honey. I've never bought this. I thought it looked great. I always bought Fane's because my uncle worked there for a decade, and he said, no, this is real honey.
Right.
And this is, very, very low pesticide type honey, kind of wild honey being picked up. Right. And I said, is Fane's good? And you said, oh, yeah,
Yeah, Fane's is good. And I think also the other side of this is that while this is showing several honeys that you don't want to buy because they've had all the honey filtered, or I'm sorry, all the pollens filtered out, there are many, many brands, mainly from smaller producers that people can buy that are very good. One of those is Fane's, one is ours, one is, well, I'd have to think some more about some of the others, but they're, all over the country. If you know the beekeeper, and if you're able to go out and see their hives and all of that, then, I would buy a honey from a beekeeper in your area. That's
Do I get to keep this?
You can keep that as long as you got to share some with these other guys over here.
Oh my gosh, you guys! I'm like Winnie the Pooh.
Taste it.
Well, I don't want to stick my finger in it.
Hey,
Hey guys, will you bring me a spoon?
Honey is naturally antibacterial.
I know it is. I know it is. They're just
There you go.
Anyways, my